There are places where civilization is just a thin, fragile film on the surface of the ancient world. The Big Cypress National Preserve in Florida is one such place. Here, in murky waters and impenetrable thickets, time flows differently. In the spring of 2008, a young amateur photographer named Andrew Collins came here in search of wild, untouched beauty. He found it, but something that lived in these swamps found him too. His story is not just about a missing tourist. It is a chilling account of a man's encounter with something that should not exist. April 2008. For 27-year-old Andrew Collins from Chicago, Illinois, this trip to Florida was a dream come true. An office worker tired of the dreariness of the metropolis, he found solace in solo hikes and wildlife photography. His blog, called Steps Aside, wasn't particularly popular. Still, for Andrew, it was a personal diary, a way to share his admiration for nature with the world. Big Cypress National Preserve, the wild and untamed neighbor of the famous Everglades, beckoned him with its pristine beauty. He planned to spend 3 days and 2 nights there, the perfect amount of time to disconnect from the world and take some unique shots. Andrew was no novice. He prepared thoroughly, studying maps, gathering new equipment, and stocking up on food and water in abundance. His route followed a well-known but little-used trail along the Turner River to a small, secluded lake that he had spotted on satellite images, the perfect place to camp and watch herons and alligators. On the morning of April 12th, he left his old Honda in the parking lot at the trailhead, slung his heavy backpack over his shoulders, and sent a final message to his sister. "I made it. Not a soul around, just the sounds of nature. It's paradise. I'll be in touch on the 15th in the evening. Don't miss me." 3 days passed in silence. The Collins family wasn't worried. They were used to his hermit tendencies. But when the evening of April 15th turned into night, and there was no call or message from Andrew, anxiety settled in their hearts. By the morning of April 16th, unable to wait any longer, his sister called the park rangers. The procedure was standard. The rangers checked the parking lot. Andrew's car was there, covered with a thin layer of pollen. This meant that he was still out there somewhere in the endless swampy forests. The search operation began immediately. Big Cypress is more than 700,000 acres of wilderness, a maze of cypress forests, mangrove thickets, swampy marshes, and waterways teeming with life. Searching for a person here was like looking for a needle in a haystack, one that was also full of poisonous snakes and alligators. 2 rangers, experienced trackers, who knew these places like the backs of their hands, set off on the route Andrew had left in his plan. Every step along the soggy trail was accompanied by the buzzing of mosquitoes. All around them was a deafening symphony of wildlife, the chirping of insects, the croaking of frogs, the cries of unfamiliar birds. But as they ventured deeper into the reserve, the rangers began to notice a strange, oppressive silence. The birds fell silent. Even the ubiquitous insects seemed to have quieted down. The air became still. "You know, I don't like this place," one of the rangers, Dave, said to his partner. "It feels like we're being watched." After 2 hours of walking, they came to a small clearing by a small moss-covered lake. It was the exact spot Andrew had marked on his map, and the first thing they saw was his tent, a bright blue dome that looked like a foreign spot amid the lush greenery. At first glance, everything seemed fine, but something was wrong. The complete, absolute silence around the camp was unnatural. The rangers cautiously approached. The tent flap was closed. Dave called out Andrew's name. There was no response. He carefully unzipped the flap and looked inside. All of the hiker's belongings were there: his backpack, neatly folded clothes, unopened food, and water bottles. His wallet, containing his documents and an expensive camera, was lying on the air mattress. The last picture on the camera, as it turned out later, had been taken 2 days earlier. A sunset over the lake. The scene inside the tent suggested that Andrew had no intention of leaving. He had disappeared. But the most disturbing and inexplicable element of the scene was outside. A few feet from the tent entrance on the damp ground lay his sleeping bag. It was unzipped and crumpled, as if it had been pulled out of the tent in one swift, powerful motion, along with whoever was inside. There were no drops of blood, no drag marks, no scraps of torn fabric near the sleeping bag. Nothing that would indicate a struggle or an attack by a common predator such as a bear or a cougar. The scene was strange and eerie. There was no logical explanation for it. Then Dave's partner, who was examining the ground around them, quietly called out to him, "Dave, come here. You have to see this. Just don't get too close." Dave walked over and looked in the direction his colleague was pointing. On the wet, muddy ground at the edge of the reeds, just 10 steps from the tent, there was a trail of footprints. But they weren't human footprints. Nor were they the footprints of a bear or an alligator. They were massive, elongated, with clear prints of 3 long, clawed toes. And the strangest thing was that they had been left by a 2-legged creature. The chain of these monstrous footprints led from the tent and disappeared into the thick, impenetrable reeds. There were no footprints in the opposite direction. Dave froze, staring at the prints on the ground. In 20 years of working in the reserve, he had seen the tracks of all kinds of creatures that inhabited these swamps. Black bears, cougars, lynxes, deer, raccoons, and of course, hundreds of alligators of all sizes. But he had never seen anything like this before. Each footprint was monstrously large, about 19 to 20 inches long, which corresponds to a size 48 shoe. But it wasn't a shoe. The print was clearly 3-toed, with long, almost bird-like toes, the ends of which showed deep indentations from claws. Most importantly, the tracks were left by a creature that walked on 2 legs. "It's not a bear," whispered his partner. "Bears have 5 toes, and their footprints are completely different, and it's not an alligator. They don't walk like that, they crawl, leaving a trail from their tail and belly." Dave slowly took out his camera and began methodically photographing the tracks from different angles. He felt a chill run down his spine. This place, which just an hour ago had seemed simply wild to him, now felt alien and hostile. Something completely out of place in Florida's familiar ecosystem had passed through here that night. It had approached the tent, pulled the sleeping man out of it, and carried him away into the impenetrable thickets, leaving not a drop of blood, not a single sound of struggle, except for these impossible tracks. The news of the discovery was immediately relayed to the operation headquarters. Soon, a group of forensic scientists and biologists from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service arrived at the clearing. The area was cordoned off. A large-scale search operation began. Over the next few days, dozens of people combed the swamps within a radius of several miles from the camp. Helicopters circled above the tops of the cypress trees, trying to spot something from the air. Teams with sniffer dogs tried to pick up the trail. Still, when the dogs reached the edge of the reed beds, where the strange footprints disappeared, they began to whimper, tuck their tails between their legs, and refuse to go any further, as if they had stumbled upon an invisible wall of terror. Divers searched the bottom of the murky lake, but found nothing but sunken snags. Meanwhile, experts analyzed plaster casts taken from the footprints. No biologist or zoologist could identify the animal to which they might belong. The theory of a giant alligator that for some reason stood on its hind legs was deemed absurd. Besides, the largest officially recorded alligator in Florida was about 15 feet long, and its footprints would have been much smaller. Someone suggested that it could have been a prank, that someone had put fake paws on their feet and kidnapped the tourist. However, this version also did not withstand scrutiny. First, why? Kidnapping for ransom was immediately ruled out. No demands were made. Second, judging by the depth of the footprints, the creature was hefty, weighing at least 150-200 kilograms. And third, no human being could have carried an adult man so silently through thick, boggy undergrowth without leaving a trail behind. After a week of fruitless searching, the active phase of the operation was called off. Andrew Collins was officially declared missing. The case was transferred to the local sheriff's office, where a file was opened with the dry, bureaucratic wording, "Disappearance in the wilderness, possible attack by a wild animal, traces unidentified." That last phrase, "traces unidentified," was a quiet admission by the authorities of their own powerlessness in the face of the inexplicable. For the official system, Andrew Collins became just another statistic, one of dozens of people who disappear every year in America's national parks. However, for the local community and those who participated in the search, the story was not yet over. It was just beginning. Rumors began to spread like ripples on water from the rangers' cabins and fishing piers. And at that moment, another strange detail came to light. The detective investigating the case decided to re-interview everyone who could have been in the vicinity of the reserve that night. That's how he came across two brothers who were fishing on a boat about a mile south of Andrew's campsite. At first, they didn't want to say anything, afraid that they would be taken for crazy, but then, word by word, they told their story. That night, at around 2 or 3 o'clock, they heard a strange sound coming from the swamps. It wasn't the cry of an animal that they could recognize. It was a long, high-pitched, almost human cry, but hoarse and unnatural, as if a man with a torn throat were screaming. It sounded once and then stopped. The brothers decided that they had imagined it, or that it was the cry of some nocturnal bird, such as a Virginia owl. But one of them, the older brother, added another detail. A few minutes after the cry, he looked toward the shore and saw a silhouette in the moonlight. Something tall, about 7 feet tall, moving on 2 legs, hunched over, with a long, tail-like appendage. It flashed for a split second between the reeds and disappeared. He then pinched himself, deciding that it was a play of light and shadow, a figment of his imagination, and the beer he had drunk. But now, having learned of the tourist's disappearance, he was no longer so sure. The fisherman's testimony was excluded from the official case as unreliable, but it was they who became the catalyst that brought to life the old, half-forgotten legends of these places. Legends that the local Seminole tribe passed on by word of mouth in whispers. Legends about a creature they called the Keeper of the Swamp. But it also had another name, one that came from the folklore of white settlers. A name that, after Andrew Collins's disappearance, began to echo throughout Florida, instilling a primal fear in people, the lizard man. The official investigation reached a dead end and effectively ceased, leaving behind only a folder marked Unsolved Case. But it was at this moment that the story of Andrew Collins began its second unofficial life. From police reports, it migrated into the realm of folklore, rumors, and conspiracy theories. Journalists writing about paranormal phenomena and independent cryptozoologists from across the country flocked to Florida. Plaster casts of monstrous footprints became their main relic. One such researcher was Dr. Arthur Wakefield, a former anthropologist who had dedicated his life to studying cryptids, creatures whose existence is not recognized by official science. For him, the Collins case was the missing link in a chain of similar incidents. This is not the first case, Wakefield said in an interview with a local TV station, pointing to the cast. Similar footprints and similar circumstances of disappearances have been recorded for decades throughout the southern United States. Remember the famous lizard man of the swamps of Skateboro in South Carolina in the 1980s? There was also evidence of a tall, two-legged creature, along with footprints that could not be identified. But the Collins case is exceptional. Here we have a perfectly preserved scene, and it speaks volumes. Wakefield and other enthusiasts put forward their theories, each more fantastic than the last. Some believed that a particular species of prehistoric reptile had survived in the Everglades, evolving to walk on its hind legs. Others spoke of a genetic experiment that had escaped from a secret laboratory. Still others spoke of a representative of an alien race for whom the swamps had become an ideal habitat. But they all agreed on one thing: the creature that had dragged Andrew away was intelligent. "Look at the facts," explained Wakefield. "The tent is untouched. Belongings, including expensive photographic equipment, are still there. It's not an animal. A bear would have ransacked everything in search of food. It's not a human robber either. The creature was only interested in Andrew himself. It approached, carefully but with great force, pulled the sleeping bag with the man out, and carried him away. No struggle, no blood. This suggests either a lightning-fast attack or the ability to paralyze the victim through sound, gaze, or some other means. This is the behavior of an intelligent, selective predator, not a mindless beast." However, officials and the scientific community had their own, much more prosaic point of view. Ranger Dave, who was the first to find the camp, and his colleagues were skeptical. "We've been working here for decades," he said in the same report. "Yes, these are wild places. But everything that happens here has a logical explanation. The scream the fisherman heard, it could have been a Virginia eagle owl or a lynx. They make sounds that make your blood run cold. The silhouette in the reeds. At night, a mile from shore, a silhouette can be anything. A snag, a shadow from a cloud, a deer rearing up, and the tracks. A swamp is not concrete. A large alligator could have left a track, which was then washed away by water, distorted, and now you think it has 3 toes and 2 legs. People see what they want to see, especially when they are scared. However, this rational explanation could not account for the most significant aspect. Where did the body go? Alligators and bears are messy predators. They leave traces behind. Scraps of clothing, bones, blood. The searchers found absolutely nothing. Andrew Collins had vanished. The most interesting and ancient version of this story was told to journalists by an older woman from the Seminole tribe who lived in a small reservation on the border of the nature reserve. Her name was May Lee, and she was the keeper of her people's oral traditions. "You white people call him the lizard man," she said, looking at the journalists with her faded but wise eyes. "For us, he has always been simply the keeper. He is neither evil nor good. He is part of this place, its spirit. He has lived here for thousands of years, since the earth was covered in water and the first trees appeared. He does not touch those who come with respect. But he does not tolerate it when people intrude on his most sacred places, when they make noise, when they behave like masters. This young man, with the camera box, may have strayed too far. Perhaps he broke some ancient taboo without knowing it. The guardian does not kill for fun. He takes those who have disturbed the peace. Where? No one knows. To his world, under the water, under the ground. He erases them from our world so that the swamp can breathe peacefully again." Her words were, of course, just folklore, but they fit the circumstances of the case with frightening accuracy. The absence of a struggle, the selectivity of the attack, the complete disappearance of the victim. The story of Andrew Collins was no longer just a case of a missing person. It was becoming another chapter in an ancient chronicle, written not with ink on paper, but with whispers around the campfire and the inexplicable horror in the eyes of those who had glimpsed beyond the edge of the familiar world. The case, closed in the police archives, remained wide open in people's minds, reminding them that even in the wildest corners of the planet, there may still be secrets that do not fit into any scientific report. For the Collins family, this fame became another circle of hell. They were left alone with their grief, without a body to bury, without answers, without comfort. The official version about an unidentified animal seemed like a form letter to them, and wild theories about the lizard man seemed like cruel mockery. They just wanted to know what had happened to their son and brother, but the swamp remained silent. Rumors of strange silhouettes and unexplained tracks in the Big Cypress area continued to surface after that. Still, none of them were backed up by such compelling, albeit bizarre, evidence as in Andrew's case. What happened that April night? Was Andrew Collins the unfortunate victim of a rare but very real predator whose tracks were distorted by the wet soil? Or did he unwittingly trespass on the territory of something far more ancient than science can imagine? Write your opinion in the comments and see you soon.